Growing up, I always felt like the extra piece, the one that didn't quite belong in the family photo. Isabel, my older sister, was the shining star. Beautiful, confident, always knowing exactly what to say to charm a room. People adored her without even trying. And I was the shadow that followed her, the quiet one in the corner, always too much or never enough. My existence seemed to highlight her brilliance, and my inadequacy. It wasn't just the comparisons. It was her voice, that sharp, sugar-coated tone she used to tear me down in front of others. "She's just sensitive," she'd say, after mocking my clothes or laughing at the way I talked about my dreams. Everyone would chuckle politely, like it was harmless fun. But it never felt harmless. It felt like being picked apart by someone who knew exactly where it hurt the most. And she never missed. Family dinners were the worst. I'd sit there, silently hoping someone would step in, say something, tell her to stop, but they never did. Instead, they smiled tightly, changed the subject, acted like her words were just part of the show. I learned to swallow my pride and keep my face neutral, even when I was crumbling inside. Isabel made sure I knew my role, and it was never to shine. She mocked everything that mattered to me. The books I loved? Too weird. The friends I had? Bottom of the barrel. My dream of starting my own business one day? Adorable. She always made sure to say it with that condescending little smile, like she was doing me a favor by pointing out how ridiculous I was. And I tried, God knows I tried, to let it roll off. But when someone chips away at you long enough, eventually, something breaks. At school, people knew me as Isabel's sister, and somehow, that came with an unspoken warning. Don't expect much. I'd walk into a room and feel the weight of her reputation pressing down on me, like I was already failing at something I hadn't even tried. Teachers would glance at me with mild disappointment, like I was a sequel that didn't live up to the original. I started shrinking myself without even realizing, dimming whatever light I had left, just to keep the peace. The thing is, I never hated her. I envied her, sure. Feared her, maybe. But what I really wanted, more than her approval, was just a moment of kindness. A flicker of sisterhood. Some sign that I wasn't crazy for wanting to be seen, to be loved in the same way she was. But Isabel didn't hand out kindness. Not to me. She treated it like a luxury, and I was always the one priced out. Looking back, I wonder how many pieces of myself I let her steal before I realized they were mine to keep. There were birthdays where she made me cry and then laughed about it. School events where I overheard her telling people I was just tagging along. And those moments, those small cutting moments, they added up. They became the lens through which I saw myself. Flawed, lesser, forgettable. I started pretending I didn't care. I stopped sharing anything with her. Not my thoughts, not my hopes, not even the little things like a new book I liked or a silly joke I heard. I learned to build walls, not out of anger, but survival. I figured if I made myself invisible, she'd have less to aim at. But invisibility came with its own kind of ache. One that lingered quietly, long after the laughter faded from the room. Everyone thought Isabel was the perfect sister. Charming, polished, adored. But behind those smiles and family photos was a girl who needed to feel bigger by making me smaller. And she succeeded. She made sure I always knew my place. Beneath her. The day I moved out, I didn't cry. Not because it didn't hurt, but because I'd already cried all those tears in private, behind closed doors, when no one thought to ask if I was okay. My bags weren't heavy, but my chest was. Leaving wasn't some bold, dramatic exit. It was quiet. Like a whisper finally breaking through years of noise. I didn't tell Isabel. I didn't need her permission, and for the first time, I didn't want her reaction. At first, life outside that house was hard. I worked 2 jobs, sometimes 3 when bills stacked up, and studied during my breaks with a thermos of cold coffee and aching feet. But something inside me shifted. I wasn't doing this to prove anything. I was doing it to breathe, to become someone that didn't flinch at the sound of her name. Every sleepless night, every missed party, every moment of exhaustion was mine, and I wore it like armor. I built slowly, brick by brick, hour by hour. A little online shop turned into a loyal customer base. Then came a physical space, small, but mine. The kind of place where I knew every crack in the floor and every smile that walked in the door. I didn't need applause. I didn't need her to notice. For the first time in my life, I was living on my own terms, and that was enough. Cutting contact wasn't a declaration of war. It was survival. I didn't block her out of bitterness. I just stopped inviting pain to dinner. No more holidays pretending everything was fine. No more fake hugs that burned like ice. I told myself if she ever wanted to reach out, really reach out, I'd listen. But deep down, I knew she wouldn't. Not Isabel. Vulnerability was never her language. Time passed, seasons changed. I grew into a version of myself I never thought possible, grounded, steady, content. And every so often, through the grapevine of relatives I barely spoke to, I'd hear bits and pieces. Isabel had gotten married, then divorced. There were rumors of debt, of a house too big for her bank account, of a lifestyle built more on appearances than stability. I didn't feel joy hearing that. Just distance. There's a strange kind of peace that comes with letting go of old expectations. I no longer needed her to see me, to validate me, or even to change. I just needed space. And I'd finally taken it. She was still living in the spotlight, but now it flickered. And I, in my quiet corner of the world, had something she never gave me: freedom. Sometimes, late at night, I'd wonder what she'd say if she saw me now. Would she scoff, call it cute? Would she pretend to be proud? Or would she, even for a second, feel the weight of what she lost? Not just a sister, but someone who once wanted her love more than anything? I stopped playing out those imaginary conversations. They only led me back to old wounds that didn't deserve reopening. I didn't wish her harm. I didn't root for her to fail. That's the part no one really understands. I just wanted a life that didn't revolve around her orbit anymore. One where I could be the center of my own story, not the footnote in hers. I didn't celebrate her missteps, but I also didn't rush to catch her when she stumbled. Some distances aren't meant to be crossed again. So when I heard quietly that things weren't going well for her, that she was struggling, I didn't feel vindicated. Just detached. The version of me who once would have bent over backwards to help? She didn't live here anymore. And that silence between us? It was no longer painful. It was peace. It was just a regular Tuesday evening. Emails, leftover pasta, a movie I'd seen a dozen times playing in the background. My phone buzzed, and at first I didn't even glance. But something nudged me, a strange feeling. And when I finally picked it up, I saw her name, Isabel. It didn't feel like a message. It felt like a ghost slipping through a crack in the door I thought I'd sealed shut. I know we've had our differences, it began. I read it twice, then a third time. My heart didn't race. My hands didn't shake. It was more like numbness. The kind you feel when you touch something that used to burn you, but doesn't anymore. She went on to say things were bad, that she was about to lose her apartment, that she had no one else. That I was doing well, right? She didn't mention the past, not once. No apology, no acknowledgement, just need. The same girl who once mocked the holes in my shoes was now asking me to help keep a roof over her head. And what caught me most wasn't the desperation. It was the entitlement laced beneath it. Like asking me for help was a natural next step, like I owed her that. I stared at the screen for a long time. Not because I didn't know how to respond, but because I wasn't sure if I wanted to. Her words were carefully chosen, vague enough to avoid accountability, but just emotional enough to spark guilt. She mentioned being in a rough patch, as if this were a minor detour, not the fallout of years of choices she made while looking down on everyone else, especially me. There was a part of me, the old me, that flickered for a moment, the version that wanted to be seen as good, generous, forgiving. That little voice whispered, "Maybe this is your chance to prove you're better." But that voice had grown weaker over the years. And now it sounded like a trap, one wrapped in politeness and pity, designed to pull me back into a role I'd worked so hard to escape. And the strangest part? I didn't feel angry. I wasn't hurt. I was tired. Tired of people only reaching for me when they're sinking. Tired of being expected to forget the past just because someone else is uncomfortable living in its consequences. She didn't ask how I was. She didn't ask if I was okay. All she said was, "I need you." And that told me everything I needed to know. I thought maybe, just maybe, she'd at least pretend to reflect. Say something like, I know I hurt you, or I understand if you can't. But no. There was no acknowledgement, no humility, just the assumption that I'd step in, that I'd fix it. As if the years between us were nothing but a pause, not a fracture, not a survival tactic. She didn't see the silence as healing. She saw it as distance to be crossed when convenient. I didn't type anything right away. I let the weight of her message settle in the room like dust. I looked around at the life I had built, quiet, clean, earned, and felt something strange. Steadiness, a kind of stillness I hadn't known in years. She was spinning in chaos, yes. But I was no longer caught in her storm. I didn't owe her the shelter she never offered me. She didn't even say sorry. Just, I need you. And for the first time in my life, I realized I didn't need her at all. I didn't overthink it. I didn't pace around the room or phone a friend for advice. I just sat there, phone in hand, and let the years answer for me. All the birthdays forgotten, the names she called me, the silence she left me in, they were louder now than anything I could write. I wasn't bitter. I wasn't broken. I was simply done. My fingers hovered over the screen for a second, then typed exactly what I felt. No dramatics, no rage, just truth. One sentence. Short, clear, final. You never needed me. And today, you still don't. I didn't wait for a response. I didn't expect one either. Some messages aren't sent to start a conversation. They're sent to end a pattern. And when I hit send, it wasn't satisfying in the way revenge fantasies make it seem. It wasn't fireworks or applause. It was silence. Deep. Full. Like setting down a heavy bag I hadn't realized I was still carrying. I turned off my phone, not with anger, but with peace. Not slamming the door, just choosing not to walk back through it. It's strange how something so simple, one sentence, can carry the weight of years. I didn't cry. I didn't smile. I just exhaled, like I'd finally been allowed to. There was no audience, no witness to the moment. Just me, in my living room, finally choosing myself without needing anyone's permission. For once, I wasn't reacting to her. I was responding to my own boundaries. I made tea, fed the cat, watered the plant by the window. Ordinary things. But they felt different now. Lighter. Like the air had shifted. Because that's the thing no one tells you about closure. Sometimes it comes without an apology. Without a grand confrontation. It shows up quietly, wrapped in clarity, and lets you move on while the other person is still spinning in the same old script. I didn't block her. I didn't check for a reply. I just let the silence speak. Not to punish her, but to honor myself. After all the noise, after all the years of trying to be heard, this was the loudest I'd ever been. I didn't replay the moment. I didn't wonder if I should have said more. The truth is, I'd spent too much of my life explaining myself to people who weren't really listening. This time, I didn't need her to understand. I just needed her to stop having a seat at my table. That one sentence wasn't just a message. It was a release. A quiet revolution whispered into a screen. The next morning, I woke up without the usual knot in my chest. No weight pressing on me before the day began. I moved through my routines, coffee, keys, open sign flipped on, with a calm I hadn't felt in years. I knew she might call, might try again, might even spin a new version of the story where I'm the villain. But I wouldn't bite. I wouldn't break. Not this time. She always thought power came from control, from being the loudest voice in the room. But now I understood something she never did. Sometimes real power is in the no. In the silence. In walking away without burning your own peace to prove a point. It didn't take long for the whispers to start. A cousin asked if I'd really turned Isabel away. An aunt left a voicemail laced with guilt and nostalgia, telling me to remember what family means. But no one, not one of them, asked what I'd been through. They only saw the headlines, never the chapters. To them, I was cold, distant, maybe even cruel. But I knew the truth. I had finally stopped bleeding to keep the peace. Then something unexpected happened. A few family members, the quiet ones, the ones who'd watched from the sidelines for years, began reaching out. Not to judge, to confess. They'd seen the way Isabel treated me. They just never said anything. I always felt bad, one of them admitted, voice barely above a whisper. But I didn't know what to do. I didn't say much in return. Some truths don't need echoing, just acknowledgement. I didn't explain myself to anyone. Not because I couldn't, but because I didn't owe the past another word. I was done justifying my peace to people who confused endurance with love. I didn't need their approval. I'd already given myself permission to move on. Life went on. My business grew. I hired help, expanded into new cities, learned to celebrate without waiting for someone to clap. I traveled when I wanted, decorated my home with soft colors and softer silences. I filled my space with people who saw me, who didn't shrink me to make room for themselves. It wasn't a fairy tale. It was better. It was real. Every so often, someone would mention Isabel in passing. I'd nod, offer a polite smile, and change the subject. I wasn't avoiding it. I just didn't feel anything anymore. Not anger, not pity, not even nostalgia. She was a chapter I had finished, placed back on the shelf, and outgrown. My story no longer revolved around her orbit. Then one day, a familiar name crossed my desk. A resume. Clean, polished, too polished. But the name was unmistakable. Isabel. I stared at it for a moment, feeling nothing. No smugness, no thrill, just clarity. She had no idea the company she was applying to, the one she thought might save her, was mine. I didn't reject her out of spite. I didn't even touch the file. I just forwarded it to HR with a single note, not a match. No one knew the backstory. No one needed to. There was no dramatic reveal, no moment where I stood above her and declared my triumph. That was never the point. The win wasn't in turning her away. It was in the fact that I could. She would never know how close she came, how quietly I had built something she once swore I'd never have. She'd never hear my name in the boardroom, never see my signature on the lease, never realize the woman she once belittled was now holding the pen, and that was the beauty of it. She didn't need to see it. I did. I didn't need revenge. I didn't need to humiliate her. All I needed was memory, and the strength to never go back.